An object's density determines whether it will sink or float in another substance. When placed in the same container, less dense substances float to the top, while more dense substances sink to the bottom. Take, for example, this penny, block of wood, and water. The penny is smaller and has less mass than the block of wood. When the two objects are placed on a scale, the beam tilts to the right because the block of wood is heavier than the penny. The penny weighs 3 grams and the block of wood weighs 11 grams. When the penny and the wood are dropped into water, the penny sinks to the bottom and the block of wood floats to the top, even though the penny has less mass than the wood. The heavier block of wood floats in the water because its density is less than the water's density. The lightweight penny sinks to the bottom because its density is greater than the water's density. Let's look at another example. Liquids can also float on top of and sink beneath each other. When rubbing alcohol, canola oil, water, and corn syrup are all placed in the same graduated cylinder, they form 4 distinct layers. Rubbing alcohol, having the lowest density, at 0.76 grams per cubic centimeter, floats to the very top of the liquids. Canola oil is more dense than rubbing alcohol, at 0.90 grams per cubic centimeter, so it sinks beneath the rubbing alcohol. Water, yet a little more dense, at 1 gram per cubic centimeter, sinks beneath the canola oil. Corn syrup, the most dense substance, at 1.38 grams per cubic centimeter, sinks to the very bottom of the cylinder. Now, the following objects will be dropped into the density column. Knowing the densities of each object and each liquid, you should be able to predict approximately what depth each object will sink or float. The rubber washer's density is 1.34 grams per cubic centimeter, which is slightly less dense than corn syrup, but more dense than water. As a result, it sinks to the border between the water and the corn syrup layer. The plastic screw's density is 0.93 grams per cubic centimeter, which is less dense than the water's density and slightly more dense than the canola oil's density. So it sinks to the bottom of the canola oil layer, floating just above the water layer. The paraffin wax's density is 0.86 grams per cubic centimeter, which is greater than the rubbing alcohol's density and slightly less than the canola oil's density. Consequently, it floats at the top of the canola oil, just beneath the rubbing alcohol layer. The wooden bead's density is 0.70 grams per cubic centimeter, which is slightly less than the rubbing alcohol's density. As a result, it floats in the rubbing alcohol just beneath the surface. The foam's density is 0.10 grams per cubic centimeter, which is significantly less than the rubbing alcohol's density. Due to its low density, the foam floats at the very top of the rubbing alcohol's surface. Now, take a look at the graduated cylinder with the density values of all the substances displayed. So the next time you want to predict whether an object will sink or float, remember to compare the density values of both substances.